Have you ever imagined what can take someone to the limit of your existence? That moment when pain becomes something deeper, darker. Today I will tell a story that few know, but may make you question everything you think about justice. While researching Alabama's forgotten files, I found documents that no one ever disclosed about Esther of Mobile. Official records tried to erase their existence, but the marks she left remain between American history. This is not just another resistance report. It is a case that forever changed the fear that the families of gentlemen felt as they sleep under the same roof as their enslaved. Find out the details that were buried for more than 2 centuries and reveal how a single woman challenged an entire system. If you believe you deserve to know the stories you have tried to silence, press the subscribe button now. What I will reveal in the next few minutes will completely change your view of the limits of human resistance. The winds of the Gulf of Mexico still wisp their name on the hot nights of Alabama. Among the wreckage of what one day was the imposing plantation Crawford, near the Mobile River, only pieces of red bricks and stone foundations resist as silent witnesses. In this place, in May 1785, a slave called Esther starred in one of the most symbolic acts of resistance ever documented in southern U.S. history. The rusty currents found in recent excavations still hold finger marks, as if the metal had been tightened with a superhuman force. The ranger of hempstring still seems to echo among the ruins, each knot representing a life taken in the name of an idea. No oppression, however institutionalized, can indefinitely suppress human desire for dignity. An unsuspecting visitor may feel chills when passing through these lands at dusk, even without knowing their history. The bodies have been removed, but the memory remains impregnated in the ground. The oppressed can rarely afford to wait for divine justice, said Esther, according to oral reports transmitted for generations. And in the early hours of that Pentecost, she decided to turn into court that had been expected for so long. If you want to follow more cases like this, which move with all society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any investigation. Plantation Crawford stretched for nearly 2,000 acres of fertile lands, where cotton grew in abundance under the merciless sky of Alabama. With 3 main houses arranged in a triangle that the enslaved ones called Boca do Hell, the complex housed more than 200 captives distributed in roofed wooden senzalas that leaked during the summer storms. The central mansion, with its 16 white columns and forged iron-ornated balconies, was visible from any point in the property, a constant reminder of the opulence built on broken bodies. The sweet and nauseating smell of cotton mingled with the odor of whipped human meat under the scorching sun, creating a perfume that Mobile traders recognized miles as the Crawford aroma. The enslaved worked 18 hours a day at the time of the harvest, moving to the rhythm of the whips of the forefront who watched them from the high-positioned wooden towers. The ticker of the clock of the big house dictated its movements, while the bronze bell, brought especially from Europe, marked the brief moments of rest. On full moon nights, the Crawford family men hunted using their slaves as prey, a sport they called Black Fox, and on which they toasted with illustrious guests from New Orleans. The dark clouds that were formed on the horizon in that spring of 1785 seemed to give off what was to come, but only Esther managed to interpret the signs. Esther was not like the other enslaved of the Crawford plantation. Born in Sierra Leone and brought as a teenager to the Americas, he dominated English, French, and 3 African dialects, a skill he kept carefully hidden from you. His position as Eleanor Crawford's personal created wife of the owner guaranteed access to privileged information and parts of the house forbidden to other slaves. His callous but accurate hands knew every medicinal herb that grew in the woods around the property, and the masters themselves resorted to their knowledge when Mobile doctors failed their treatments. With his haughty possession and penetrating eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, he moved between 2 worlds, serving the masters as he secretly fed the dreams of freedom among his own. In the few moments of privacy, taught other slaves to read using twigs on the damp land, rapidly erasing marks to the slightest sign of approximation. The Crawford trusted her to prepare their meals, keep their jewelry, and even take care of their young children, never suspecting that the same woman who sang lullabies for her heirs, memorizing every business conversation, every family secret, every weakness of the power structure that kept her captive. They think my obedience means acceptance, Daniel, an old slavery who served as a coachman. But the river also seems calm before overflowing. Leave in the comments. Never give up the truth if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. Crawford's cruelty manifested itself to varying degrees, such as a disease that slowly progresses until it consumes the whole body. First came the exemplary punishments. William Crawford disappointed the finger of the enslaved by overthrowing a cup of tea. His eldest son, Thomas, had the face of a child who collected an apple without permission. Then the abuses became more elaborate. Eleanor Crawford forced the women to their knees on dry corn for hours as they recited Bible passages. The three nephews of the Lord, coming from Virginia to learn the craft of managing slaves, turned torture into fun, betting how long a man could bear, submerged into water before passing out. Cada novo ultraje era testemunhado por Esther, que servia o vinho enquanto os senhores discutiam com naturalidade os castigos do dia seguinte. His eyes, apparently low in submission, recorded every detail, every word. Her heart, once heavy in pain, began to harden as iron left in the fire. When Eleanor Crawford ordered Esther to whip a friend for breaking a valuable mirror, something changed inside her. Thanks to inflicting pain to someone he loved, Esther understood that his soul was being destroyed as systematically as his body. That night, for the first time, he did not pray for mercy, but by force. The 1784 winter brought with it not only the sharp cold that froze the shacks of the enslaved, but also the presence of Hannah, Esther's youngest daughter, who had been 15. Until then kept on another Crawford property, the young woman had been brought to serve as a lady of the Lord's daughter. Hannah's eyes, identical to her mother's, shone with an innocence that Esther had long lost. During the few weeks when they could be together, Esther taught his daughter everything he knew about herbs, about silent dignity, survival. In the rare moments alone, he told stories of Sierra Leone, from the land of the ancestors Hannah would never know. It was on Sunday afternoon, when you had gone out for the service, that Esther cut a small strand of her daughter's hair and put her inside a lock of cloth by her chest. "So that we are always together," he explained, tying the cord around the girl's neck. The next day, Thomas Crawford, the family's firstborn, noticed Hannah's flourishing beauty as she served breakfast. 3 days later, they found the young woman's body hanging on a cypress near the river. "Suicide," said the local pastor without asking any question. That night, in the fluttering light of a stolen candle, Esther kissed the cloth bag and took an oath before the stars. Their tears dried up before they even touched the floor. Crawford's cruelty was not exclusive to a single family, but part of a larger system that branched by the Southern society as roots of a poisonous oak. William Crawford, with his personalized alligator leather whip and his collection of torture instruments imported from Europe, was admired among local owners for maintaining the exemplary discipline of their slaves. His brother, Reverend Joseph Crawford, preached on Sundays about the divine legitimacy of slavery as he kept a secret basement where he purified, enslaved through wicked rituals. The three nephews, Henry, Edward, and Samuel, formed a sadism triumvirate, each with his own specialty. Henry preferred fire, Edward a water, Samuel the strings. But it was during the celebration of William Crawford's 50-year anniversary in April 1785 that Esther witnessed the event that would seal the family's destination. Important guests from all over Alabama gathered for a 3-day banquet. At the height of the festivities, drunk from bourbon and power, Crawford men brought to the main hall 10 slaves to a demonstration of obedience. Among them was Daniel, the old coachman Esther considered as a father. Forced to fight each other to death, only 3 survived. Daniel, no. It was among them. Serving the coffee after the show, Esther kept the expression impassive as Eleanor commented on the bloodstains that would be difficult to remove from the Persian rug. That night, looking at the stars through a crack on the roof of the senzala, Esther understood that there was no choice. May 15th, 1785 began like any other at Plantation Crawford, but for Esther, every second throbbing with painful clarity. In the presence of the whole enslaved community, William Crawford ordered Esther to be tied to the trunk of punishments for allegedly spoiled and valuable Eleanor dress. As the whip ripped his back, Esther did not emit a single sound. His silence, more than any scream, disturbed even the most hardened forever. After 50 whipped, when his body hung semi-conscious, William Crawford approached and whispered in his ear, Thank me for teaching her humility." With his mouth full of blood, Esther replied, "I will teach you something much more valuable." The Lord laughed, taking the words like delirium of a broken mind. Then, as it was customary after exemplary punishments, Esther was dragged to the center of the courtyard and left exposed to the scorching sun, a walking warning to the others. The flies attracted to fresh blood zombie around them. The enslaved children were forced to pass before her, looking straight at their wounds. When the sun began to set, Esther raised his head for the first time, and his eyes met Sarah's, the oldest healer of the plantation. Something silent passed between them. That night as you slept, Esther looked at her fragmented reflex in a broken piece of glass. His face, before expression of contained pain, now showed only determination. The transformation was complete. In the weeks that followed his public humiliation, Esther moved as a shadow for the Crawford plantation, gathering allies with the care of those who collect dewdrops without disturbing the leaves. Sarah, the old healer who knew the secrets of poisonous and harmless plants. Isaiah, the blacksmith whose powerful hands forged both tools and resentment. Benjamin, the young man who worked in the stables and could move through the property without arousing suspicion. And Ruth, the washerwoman who had access to every corner of the big house. Each was chosen not only for their strategic position, but for loading too deep scars to be forgotten. "I do not promise we will survive," Esther said at the first secret meeting, held at Sarah's cabin under the pretext of treatment for his wounds still open. "I just promise that they will never do another what they did to us." The plan became the name of Exodus, a reference to the biblical book that you so much like to selectively quote in Sunday sermons. Every detail has been meticulously mapped. The Crawford family's sleep habits, the forecasts of the forefront, the guard dogs and their weaknesses, the swamp routes by the swamp. Sarah prepared herbs that, mixed with the dogs' food, would make them sleep deeply without killing them. Isaiah forged small blades that could be hidden in the folds of the clothes. The date chosen was not by chance. Pentecost Sunday, when the Crawford would celebrate with a big party, drinking beyond the account and lowering the guard. 7 days, Esther announced the day before, while lighting 7 small makeshift candles with animal fat. One by one, the flames were erased, marking the countdown to what they called in whispers, the reckoning. On the eve of Pentecost Sunday, the Crawford plantation was seething with contrasting activities. In the big house, decorated with fresh flowers and colored ribbons, the preparations for the religious celebration mingled with the excitement buzz for the arrival of the illustrious guests. Eleanor Crawford personally supervised the arrangement of imported plot from England, while nephews Henry, Edward, and Samuel argued excitedly about the French wine bottles that would be opened after the sermon. In the outer kitchens, enslaved moved in a frantic ballet, baking whole pigs, preparing puddings, and polishing crystal bowls. At the same time, far from the eyes of the lords, a very different ritual unfolded. In the senzalas, Esther distributed small amulets made with herbs and earth, which each plan participant hid near his chest. "It's not magic," she explained. "It is to remember who we are when the moment comes." The tilint of the bells of the Crawford private chapel mingled to the distant sound of the makeshift drums that the slaves touched discreetly, using buckets turned as instruments. The air seemed dense, loaded with electricity, as before a large storm. In the stables, Benjamin prepared secretly the horses, loosening some saddles and checking which mounts would be best suited for the escape. In the main room of the big house, as he helped Eleanor choose his jewelry for the next day, Esther noted how the trembiluscente candlelight projected shadows that looked like ropes on the white wall, a omen that made her smile for the first time in many months. At midnight, when the last chandelier was erased in the big house, Esther signaled through the kitchen window. 3 quick flashlights of a covered flashlight. The answer came from the senzalas. 3 similar flashes. It was all ready. Pentecost Sunday's dawn brought with it a low mist that covered the cotton fields as a protective cloak. Even before the first rays of sunshine crossed the horizon, Esther was already in the kitchen of Casa Grande, preparing the special breakfast for the Crawford family. With accurate movements, it added to the beverages the powder prepared by Sarah, not poisonous, just enough to induce deep sleepiness. Isaiah had positioned himself near the back door, holding gardening tools as a disguise. Ruth circulated between the laundry and the rooms, placing clean towels while checking the position of each family member. The first phase of the plan began at 6 in the morning, when Esther personally served breakfast in bed to William and Eleanor Crawford. "It's exceptionally tasty today, Esther," said sleepy Eleanor, not noticing the brightness in the eyes of the enslaved. Then Benjamin took similar trays to the 3 nephews, who had spent the night drinking and could barely keep their eyes open. At 7 o'clock, the entire Crawford family was in a state of semi-conscience, vulnerable as never before. The second phase began with a sign of Esther, a red scarf hanging discreetly in the kitchen window. Isaiah and 2 other men silently entered the house, carrying the ropes that had been prepared days before, the same strings used by the Crawford to flog their slaves. One by one, the rooms were infiltrated. William Crawford briefly opened his eyes when Esther tied his hands, but his numb mind did not understand what was happening. "I'm just changing your sheets, Lord," she murmured, and he sinks back into his induced numbness. Eleanor didn't even woke up when Ruth gagged her mouth with a piece of silk. The 3 nephews, isolated in their respective guest rooms, were the last to be immobilized. At 8 o'clock in the morning, while the chapel bells began to play calling for religious service, the 5 members of the Crawford family were completely at the mercy of those who had oppressed so long. "Now," said Esther, "the trial begins." William Crawford was the first to be completely awakened, with cold water thrown on his face. Tied firmly to his own bed, he found himself surrounded by faces he knew only as properties, now transformed by determination. "What does this boldness mean?" He tried to scream, but his voice came out weak due to the herbs still circulating in his blood. Esther approached slowly, holding the personalized alligator leather whip that had so many times cut her skin. "Do you recognize this?" he asked, his calm voice like deep water. Before she could answer, she continued, "Every brand you left in us, Mr. Crawford, will now be returned." The procedure was methodical, almost ritual. In each room, the same scene was repeated. Eleanor Crawford, confronted with the women who had tortured over the years, heard from Ruth. "Do you remember when you had my baby out of my arms and sell it because her cry disturbed her sleep?" The 3 nephews, gathered in the main hall under Isaiah's surveillance, were forced to witness to the punishments of others. Henry, who so much appreciated the use of fire, felt the warmth of the embers approaching his skin, but Esther intervened. "We will not become like them." There was no prolonged physical torture, only the symbolic justice that Esther had planned. For each atrocity committed by Crawford, a sentence was rendered, a recognition was required. "Do you remember Daniel?" Esther asked William Crawford while showing the little strand of hair that had belonged to his daughter Hannah. "Do you remember my daughter?" The silence that followed was its confession. At 9 o'clock in the morning, when guests began to arrive for the celebration of Pentecost, and found only enslaved running through the fields toward freedom, Esther concluded the trial with a single sentence. "May God have more mercy on your souls than you had of our bodies." The ropes, the same ones that had beaten generations of enslaved, found their final purpose. While the smoke was beginning to climb the house Grandin from Plantation Crawford, Esther drove a very different ritual on the banks of the Mobile River. About 70 enslaved, almost half of the captive population of the property, had followed their call to freedom. Some, paralyzed by fear or disbelief in the possibility of a life besides the fences of Plantation, chose to remain. Esther did not judge them. "Each one carries his arrest or his freedom within himself," she told those who hesitated on the property's border. In the shallow waters of the river, a makeshift purification ceremony took shape. One by one, the fugitives entered the water, submerged briefly, and emerged under the first rays of sun that finally crossed the mist. It was not a Christian baptism, but something older, connected to the traditions that Esther was still keeping from Sierra Leone. "The water doesn't just wash the body," she explained to the younger ones. "It takes the name of slave to us." Leaving Rio, each person received a new name, chosen by themselves, the first truly free decision that many made in their lives. Isaiah, the blacksmith, methodically broke the shackles that some still carried, turning them into small amulets that would be carried as a memory. A great fire has been lit, not for destruction, but for renaissance. In it, documents were burned from the great house that established property about humans. In the distance, the chapel bells continued to play, now in alarm, while the news of the bodies found in the big house was beginning to spread. We even knew before the knights leave in our persecution, Benjamin calculated. Organized in small family groups, the freeders formed a long column that served by the riverbank towards the southern swamps where fugitive slaves had already established secret settlements. Esther stayed last, observing the procession that walked away. For a moment he looked back into the smoke that now climbed a spiral of the Crawford plantation and saw a lonely bird circulating above the flames. "Go in peace, Hannah," he whispered before following the path of freedom. The news of what had happened at Plantation Crawford spread throughout the South like fire in Campo Seco. Mobile and New Orleans newspapers reported the event as a wild rebellion and a brutal massacre, carefully omitting any mention of the atrocities committed by the Crawford family. Official reports sent to the governor of Alabama described Esther as a dangerous intelligence demonic black and offered exorbitant rewards for their capture. Alarmed letters circulated among the owners of slaves in the region, many of whom started sleeping with weapons under the pillows and implementing increasingly severe security measures on their properties. But in the whispers exchanged in the senzalas, in the stories told low in the cotton fields, Esther became something larger than a woman became a symbol. The Crawford method, as it came to be known among the enslaved, inspired similar actions on neighboring plantations. Not always hanging, not always massive escapes, but small acts of resistance that grew in frequency and boldness. In less than 6 months after Pentecost read, as the event was secretly baptized, more than 200 slaves had fled properties within 50 miles around Mobile. Owners reported insolent and threatening behaviors even among the most docile captives. A foreman was found dead with a grate attached to his chest. Esther's memories. Among the white population, fear had become palpable. Among the enslaved, something equally powerful flourished: hope. Before Esther, he would tell years later a former slave in his memories report, we just thought about surviving. After her, we started thinking about living. Alabama's response to Esther-led escape was quick and relentless. A force of more than 300 men, made up of local militias and professional slave hunters, was mobilized to track fugitives in the southern swamps. Sneakers were brought from Georgia, specially trained to hunt humans through the flooded and treacherous land. The governor authorized the use of all resources necessary to exter this threat to public security and social order. During the first 2 weeks, fugitives were able to maintain distance from their persecutors, dividing into smaller groups and using techniques learned with local indigenous tribes to camouflage their tracks. Esther led the larger group, consisting mainly of women and children, while Isaiah and Benjamin commanded smaller contingents that occasionally carried out diverse attacks to confuse the persecutors. The situation changed dramatically when Jack O.B., a young man who had been captured during an expedition to seek water, broke under torture and revealed the approximate location of the main camp. In the early hours of June 17, 1785, the siege began. The Jacob-oriented militiamen approached the camp established on a small elevated island in the midfield. Esther, alerted by sentinels, quickly organized the evacuation of children and the elderly, while a small group of combatants was preparing for resistance. The following confrontation entered the annals of slave resistance as Esther's last position. For nearly 5 hours, 27 fugitives armed with makeshift tools and some stolen weapons have kept more than 100 well-equipped militians away. Sarah, the old healer, fell first, hit while trying to protect a group of children. Benjamin was captured alive, just to be executed summarily minutes later. One by one, the defenders succumbed. When only Esther and Isaiah remained, entrenched behind fallen logs, a militia officer offered surrender. "Tell your masters," Esther replied aloud enough to be heard by all present, "that we prefer to die once as free people than every day as slaves." His last words, recorded by a military chaplain who accompanied the expedition, echoed through the swamps. "Our bodies can be chained again, but our minds prove the taste of freedom, and that you can never capture." Officially, Esther's story ended in that swamp, his body displayed in Mobile as a warning to others that dare to dream freely. Local authorities considered the case closed, with all the fugitives killed or recaptured, and the order restored in the surrounding plantations. But among the enslaved communities of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, another narrative began to flourish, transmitted in whispers at night and in coded songs sung in the fields. Reports of enslaved that escaped the persecution said that Esther was never really captured. The body displayed in Mobile belonged to another woman, similar at height and constitution. According to these stories, Esther would have been able to conduct a small group of survivors through the swamps to territories controlled by native tribes that offered refuge. In the following decades, travelers occasionally reported encounters with a mysterious woman in the border regions between Alabama and Mississippi, a healer of gray hair and scars on the back, which helped running slaves to find safe routes to the north. Strange objects began to appear in the plantations. Small cloth dolls with tiny strings tied to the neck, left in the sills of the doors of particularly cruel gentlemen. Some enslaved families guarded as precious treasures, allegedly blessed by Esther itself, small bags containing ground, herbs, and a string wire. On full moon nights, the Ballad of Esther was sang in code, whose chorus spoke of a bird that flew so high that not even the most skilled hunter could reach it. In the settlements of fugitive slaves, stories were told about the mother of the Exodus, which appeared in the most desperate hours to guide the persecuted to security. In the 1850s, academics and historians began to investigate the case, initially treating it as mere superstition. Professor James Thornwell of the University of Virginia published in 1853 an article entitled "The Myth of Esther, Anatomy of a Slave Legend," arguing that the whole history had been exaggerated and that Esther probably did not even exist as a royal individual. Interestingly, during her Mobile research, Thornwell suddenly got sick after drinking a tea offered by an elderly lady who helped him as a local guide. Contemporary historians, however, have recovered official documents that confirm not only the existence of Esther and the Crawford family massacre, but also surprising details about their previous life, their knowledge of tongues, their skills as healer, and first-hand reports about their execution, or supposed execution. What remains undeniable is the lasting impact of your actions. In the years preceding the American Civil War, the Esther spirit was often invoked in secret and slain meetings. After emancipation, black families in Alabama revealed that they had appointed their daughters in honor of it for generations. In 1889, a community of former Slavics near Mobile built a small chapel with a simple plate, "For Esther, which showed us the way." On certain days of the year, especially in Pentecost, visitors still leave strings untied at the entrance, a symbol of breaking the shackles and justice finally achieved. Perhaps Esther's most powerful legacy is not in the historical documents or popular legends, but in the shiver that runs through the spine of oppressors when they understand a fundamental truth that it has shown this morning of Pentecost. No system of domination, no matter how old or institutionalized, it is truly safe when the oppressed decide that dignity is more than survival. As a 19th century anonymous poet said in a verse believed to be dedicated to her, "Some names cannot be buried, some fires never get extinguished." If you watched so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here," so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth. Enjoy this video if Esther's story touched her heart. Share so that Esther's memory is never forgotten.